You never know the moment your life is about to change. For Elijah Vance, that moment began with the scent of lemon-scented polish and the sound of his own heart thudding dully against his ribs. The courthouse hallway was a river of polished floors, fluorescent lights, and anxious people flowing toward their fate. And Elijah, a man who had built his life with these two hands, felt like he was drowning in it. He was a contractor, a master craftsman. He could look at a piece of warped wood and see the straight line within it. He could lay a foundation that would stand for a century. But the law was a tangled forest where he couldn't find a path. And the man who was supposed to be his guide, his lawyer, was making him feel like a fool for even getting lost. Jonathan Sterling of Sterling and Pierce was everything Elijah was not. Young, slick, with a suit that cost more than Elijah's truck, and a smile as genuine as a $3 bill. He'd taken Elijah's case, a brutal contract dispute where a wealthy developer was trying to cheat him out of $60,000 for a completed job. As a favor, he'd said, a pro bono gesture. But the favor came with a heavy tax of condescension. They stood in the hallway outside Courtroom 4B. Sterling was scrolling through his phone, barely listening as Elijah tried to explain a key detail about the payment schedule. Look, Mr. Sterling, the addendum clearly states. Elijah, relax. Sterling didn't look up from his screen. I've got this. It's a simple matter. You just need to let me handle it. These things are nuanced. You just stand there, look respectful, and let me do the talking. The hook, the moment the ordinary anxiety sharpened into something colder, more humiliating, came next. An older, portly white man in an even more expensive suit approached, clapping Sterling on the back. John, heard you drew old Judge Henderson. Tough break. Sterling finally pocketed his phone, laughing a little too loudly. Tell me about it. The man's a dinosaur. Then he jerked his thumb, a crude, dismissive gesture, toward Elijah. And I'm stuck with this pro bono case. Guy doesn't know a lien from a lawnmower, and his paperwork is a nightmare. Trying to sue Malcolm Croft Development Company, of all people. It's like bringing a spoon to a gunfight. The other lawyer chuckled. Croft? Good luck. You'll need it. Elijah felt the heat rise up his neck. He was standing right there. He wasn't a this. He was a man who had built a business from nothing, who employed 5 people, who had a daughter in college. The paperwork was a nightmare because he'd been trying to save money, because Sterling had told him not to worry about it. The spoon to a gunfight comment felt like a physical blow. Sterling turned back to him, his expression one profound boredom. All right, Elijah, remember, stand up straight. Say, yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. And for God's sake, don't try to speak unless I tell you to. You'll just make it worse. They entered the courtroom. It was as imposing as a church, all dark wood and solemn silence. The air was thick with judgment. They took their place at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, the developer's team, 3 lawyers in a row, smirked at them. Malcolm Croft himself wasn't even there. He didn't need to be. The bailiff called out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Henderson." Everyone stood. A door behind a bench opened, and the judge emerged, donning his black robe. He was an older black man, with a stern, lined face and close-cropped gray hair. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, like a man who had seen every trick in the book and was no longer impressed by any of them. He Saturday be seated. His voice was a low rumble like distant thunder. The hearing began. Sterling stood, and it was immediately clear he was in over his head. He fumbled with his notes, his confident swagger replaced by a nervous stutter. He misstated a case citation. He referred to a key piece of evidence that he'd forgotten to file with the court. Judge Henderson listened, his expression unreadable. He let Sterling dig his own grave, his questions sharp and precise, puncturing Sterling's flimsy arguments with the ease of a pin popping a balloon. "Counselor," the judge finally said, a note of weary patience in his voice, "your argument seems to be missing its foundation. Do you have any documentation to support your client's claim regarding the oral modification of the payment schedule?" Sterling flushed. "Your Honor, my client, that is, the plaintiff, he is a simple man. He operates on a handshake basis." He didn't. We don't have that in writing. The judge's eyes, dark and piercing, shifted from Sterling to Elijah. He held Elijah's gaze for a long moment. Elijah felt seen, not as a simple man, but as a person. He saw a flicker of something in the judge's eyes, not pity, but recognition. "I see," the judge said quietly. He turned back to Sterling. A handshake in a multi-million-dollar development project. The developer's lead counsel stood, a smug smile on his face. "Your Honor, this is precisely why we move for summary judgment. There is no case here. It's a frivolous lawsuit by a disgruntled contractor who failed to protect his own interests." It was over. Elijah could feel it. The $60,000, his payroll, his reputation. It was all about be swept away by the polished, indifferent machinery of the law. Sterling sat down, defeated, and had the gall to whisper to Elijah, "See? I told you it was a long shot. You can't win these things." But then something shifted. Judge Henderson didn't rule. He leaned forward, his hand steepled under his chin. "Mr. Sterling," he began, his voice deceptively soft. "Before I issue my ruling, I have a question. In the hallway, before this hearing, you were overheard discussing this case. You referred to your client as a spoon in a gunfight. Could you explain to the court what you meant by that?" The blood drained from Jonathan Sterling's face. The courtroom, already quiet, became a vacuum of silence. Your Honor, I don't..." "That was a private conversation," he stammered. "There is no privacy in a public hallway, Counselor," the judge rumbled. "The question stands. Explain your metaphor." Sterling was floundering. It was just a figure of speech. "Your Honor, I meant that my client is outgunned, legally speaking." "Outgunned," the judge repeated. "Because he is a simple man? Because he operates on a handshake? Because his own attorney, the man he trusted to be his advocate, holds him in such contempt that he would mock his lack of legal sophistication to a colleague while standing right beside him?" Every word was a hammer blow. Elijah sat, stunned, his heart pounding for a completely different reason now. "Your Honor, I object," the developer's lawyer interjected. "This is irrelevant to the motion for summary judgment." "Sit down, Mr. Evans," Judge Henderson said, without even looking at him. His gaze was fixed on Sterling, who looked like he wanted the polished floor to swallow him whole. And then the judge did something extraordinary. He slowly stood up. He unzipped his judicial robe, shrugging it off his shoulders. He folded it neatly and placed it over the back of his high-backed leather chair. Beneath it, he wore a simple but impeccably tailored business suit. He walked around the bench, not as a judge, but as a man. He stopped in the well of the courtroom, between the two tables, and looked directly at Elijah. The entire courtroom held its breath. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice now different, softer, but carrying even more weight. 35 years ago, I wasn't Judge Henderson. I was Michael Henderson, a first-year law student, working construction to pay my tuition. A man named Samuel Vance took me under his wing. He taught me how to hold a hammer, how to read a blueprint, and more importantly, he taught me about integrity. He told me that a man's word and his work were the same thing. He was my boss, and he was my friend. Elijah's eyes widened. Sam Vance was my father. A sad, small smile touched Judge Henderson's lips. "I know. I've been following your company, Vance and Son, for years. Your father would be so proud of the craftsman you become." He then turned his gaze to Jonathan Sterling, and the warmth vanished, replaced by glacial ice. "You see, Mr. Sterling, you were right about one thing. It is like a spoon go to a gunfight, but you had it backwards." He paused, letting the silence thicken. "You, with your expensive education and your tailored suit, you are the spoon. A shallow, polished, useless thing when real work needs to be done. And the law," he gestured around a majestic, intimidating room. "The law, when wielded with integrity, is the gun. But you have forgotten what the law is for. It is not for the amusement of slick young men in hallways. It is for the people. It is for men like Samuel Vance, and for men like his son, Elijah." He walked back to the bench, but he did not put his robe back on. He stood beside it, The motion for summary judgment is denied, he declared, his voice ringing with finality. This case will proceed to trial. Furthermore, I am recusing myself due to a conflict of interest. But before I do, I am referring Mr. Jonathan Sterling to the State Bar for disciplinary action for gross incompetence and ethical violations. Your career playing with people's lives is over. He then looked at the developer's stunned legal team. And you can tell Mr. Croft that the new judge on this case will be made fully aware of the court's dim view of developers who try to cheat honest men out of their honest wages. I suspect he will find it in his interest to settle. Immediately, he picked up his gavel, but didn't strike it. He just held it. This court is adjourned. He didn't wait for a response. Judge Michael Henderson turned and walked out the same door he had entered, leaving behind a silent, shattered courtroom. Jonathan Sterling was frozen, a monument to his own prejudice and arrogance, finally understanding that the man he had deemed a spoon was, in fact, an anvil, and that he had just been shattered upon it. Elijah Vance slowly stood up. He didn't look at his former lawyer. He smoothed down his own simple, clean work shirt. He picked up his hard hat from under the table, and he walked out of the courtroom, his head held high, the foundation of his world not just repaired, but fortified, stronger than ever before.